Welcome to the Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim Coffman from the Holy Land. Welcome back. Don't smoke crack, Rabbi. How are you?
Doing great. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here always. I pushed my soundboard so far away I couldn't gradually fade it like I wanted to. I was going to finesse it down into a nice little fade. Didn't work out too well, but that's okay. We don't need it. Just like we don't need no.
Hey, I heard that song before somewhere.
It seems like I heard it today, even from our conversation earlier.
It's like a bad echo.
I know, right? Isn't that crazy? Good deal. All right, so let me make sure I get more set to public. Very good. Let me turn my mic down. It's a little spiky. Check 1, 2. That's all better. Very good. All right, so why don't Jews proselytize, or shall I to put it milder, why don't Jews go throughout the world and preach the gospel?
That's what you should have made the title. That would have been a great title.
I know, right? So it's definitely a hot topic for sure. Because a lot of people think that being a light to the nation means you should go out door knocking, and so that's what we're going to discuss today. So why don't you just tell us what you think?
I'm going to tell you what I think. So it's always a pleasure to be here. First, we'll sort of work backwards like we normally do, and then we'll actually hit the question. And it's known that the Torah tells us the Jewish people are the chosen nation, right? We are a Am Mamleches Kohanim. We are a priestly nation, and God chose us. We chose Him. None of the nations were interested in the Torah, and God chose us. We went to Mount Sinai, gave us the Torah, gave us the commandments, and all that. So there's a limit, though. What's the limit? The limit is that if we do what we're supposed to do, right, just like when we say the Shema every day or twice a day, if we do the right thing, everything is good. If we do the wrong thing, there's payback. Right? There's going to be punishment. So we spoke about punishment, spoke about suffering, right? But what is the idea, right? It sort of annoys a lot of people when they hear that, the Jews, they consider themselves the chosen nation. Well, God's the one who said it in front of everybody, right? In front of, 3 million people. No one else makes such a claim. But what does it mean to be chosen, right? It can certainly create hatred amongst the nations. Like, you think you're better? You get a better pedigree. Who cares if God spoke and He said this? People don't like it. All right, just like when we went to Mount Sinai, one explanation that when the Jews got the Torah, what does the word Sinai mean? The root of the word is sin nun aleph, or sin nun yud, which means hatred. In other words, when God gave the Jews the Torah, so there was hatred. Tremendous amount of hatred amongst the nations. So I would say, what are you so upset about? You had an opportunity to have the Torah, right? You had an opportunity to choose, and you didn't want it. You weren't interested, etc. For whatever reason. Now, someone who wants to be part of it, either they can stay in Noahide, right? Or they can go through conversion. So when we make a blessing in the morning, right? What do we say? We say, thank God I'm not a slave. We say, thank God I'm not a Gentile. We say, thank God I'm not a woman, right? So now that makes us certainly look bad, as well. So why do we say in the negative like that? So what's the connotation? Connotation is about mitzvahs, right? Why do I say, thank God I'm not a woman? Because she has less mitzvahs, right? Thank God I'm not a non-Jew, also has less mitzvahs. Unless that non-Jew wants to convert, then he can have all the mitzvahs, but then he's not a non-Jew. So that wouldn't make, so much sense. A slave also has the same amount of mitzvahs, similar to a woman. So that being the case, we're thanking God that we have more mitzvahs. We have more commandments. So what does that do? That makes us more obligated. If it makes us more obligated, so then we have a higher potential to reach if we don't do what we're supposed to do. We spoke a few weeks back, about suffering, and all that. And that is that we can get slaughtered for relatively minor infractions. Why? Very simple, because the closer we are to the king, right, the worse off it is. Someone's the water boy or the mail carrier, whatever. and he does something wrong, the king's not really going to care. He does 2 things wrong, 5 things wrong, fine, they'll fire him. But if he's the vice president, right, he's second in command to the king, that's a different story. So being chosen gives us obligations, right? We have, many, many obligations, what we have to do on a daily basis, on Shabbos, on festivals. So that comes with tremendous responsibility. By having all this responsibility, what is that? What should that do? What that should do, as the prophets tell us, when we wear tefillin, phylacteries, whatever you want to call them, we wear them on our arms. We wear them on our arm, on our, frontlets between our eyes. Put them right here, right in the forehead, right? What should that do? That should not only draw us closer to God, that should put the fear of God in non-Jews. Now, the last time I checked, I don't see any, non-Jews having, fear, tremendous fear of heaven over here when they see a Jew, dressed up wearing the towels and tefillin, right? I remember once I was in the airport and, I put on my towels and tefillin. So, got a few shaloms, people looked, whatever, that was it. So was that respect? Was that making fun? Was that other things? It didn't seem that there was this unbelievable fear of heaven, right? They're going to say, what happened over here? If we understand there are 4 parchments in tefillin, right, that, that are written, about the Shema, about coming out of Egypt. So it's got unbelievable power. Where does it go? It goes right here, right? And also we put it in our arm, right? Left arm, right arm, depending if you're right-handed, left-handed, whatever it is, that's supposed to generate to the heart. That's supposed to have a connection from the mind to the heart. So if we do what we're supposed to do, as Jews, what should that do in real time? That should change the world. That has the ability to change the world by making blessings. When we make a blessing, what does that do? Let's say we made a blessing over an apple, right? The blessing over an apple is Brei Priya Eitz, grows from a tree. So we believe that has a tremendous influence, spiritual influence over all fruit-bearing trees. So what do you mean? I just ate an apple. I ate a peach. We don't see how these things grow, exponentially, all these different things. We don't see it, right? We don't fathom it, but it has that power, right? It's got an unbelievable amount of power. In physical terms, you're taking a physical thing, you're making a blessing, you're mentioning God's name. What does that do? It has tremendous amount of spiritual power. But it also, what am I doing? I'm eating, right? I'm doing a physical act that has physical repercussions, i.e. I'm eating, and also has spiritual repercussions because I'm saying a blessing and invoking God's name. So by saying that, what should happen? What should happen is that if we would do what we're supposed to do, i.e. the Jewish people, then the non-Jews should fall in line. What does that mean, fall in line? They're going to say, thank God his Rebbe taught him Torah. Thank God his father, taught him Torah. Now, does that mean this non-Jew, wherever they are, they're going to say, I want to convert, right? They're not obligated. They're certainly not obligated. They'd be more obligated, certainly, to be a Noahide, right? No question. We've spoken a lot about that, and I always say, if God wanted everyone to be Jewish, they would have been, right? But obviously, not everyone has to convert. So, therefore, if they want to, fine, if they meet the criteria. If not, also. But if we do what we're supposed to do, the world looks different. Now, if that would be the case, now many non-Jews say in the process of conversion, doesn't say anywhere in the Code of Jewish Law, in Shulchan Aruch, doesn't say anywhere in the Talmud, that I have to live amongst Jews. Right? In other words, I have to live within walking distance, of a synagogue. I have to live within a Jewish community, right? So that may be true, right? It doesn't say anywhere. But how's the person going to know? And how are they going to understand to be a Jew, right? If they don't live amongst Jews. So could be maybe 300 years ago or more, a non-Jew, could have learned things by osmosis. They could have seen what Jews do, how they act, and that would have been a different story, right? But today, certainly that is not the case because we have 13.5 million Jews don't know anything, right? They don't know anything about their own religion. So therefore, so what's the point? If we're doing what we're supposed to do as the chosen nation, then the non-Jews know what they're supposed to do. right? They should know what they're supposed to do. Now, someone's going to ask the question, and as it was posed, why are we out there like, praising the gospel, so to speak, and bringing it to everybody? So first of all, we got a major issue. What's the major issue? I mean, we got a lot of issues. One of them is the fact that converts to Judaism have given the Jews a bad name throughout the millennium, right? They made us look bad in many different ways. And the process, is stringent the way it should be, right? At least the way it should be done. And the reason is because we do not want mediocre people coming in, right? There are plenty of them, unfortunately, amongst our own people, right? We don't need more mediocre people coming in. We want people going to show that they're the real deal. Now, does that mean they're obligated? No. If they want to convert, that's great. They want to meet the criteria, that's great. They finish the process, even better, right? But no one says they have to go through the process, right? If they want to, that's fine. Now comes a non-Jew, and a non-Jew is going to say, hey, all right, I came out of Christianity. I don't believe in the church. I don't believe in the Trinity. I don't believe in any of this. What am I supposed to do now, right? Where am I supposed to go now? So the claim against us is going to be, why aren't we out there teaching them, right? Why are we not out there, teaching non-Jews about their own mitzvahs? It would make life a lot easier. True. Definitely true. There are people that are doing it, probably not enough, right? That is also true, right? But let's, before we even get to conversion, let's mention about non-Jews. So why are we not out there, proselytizing non-Jews to keep the Noahide laws? So now, one group is very big in this, and that is Chabad, right? For many, many years, they've been at the forefront of trying to teach non-Jews, the Noahide laws, etc. But they're pretty much alone, all right? They're pretty much by themselves. Now, the question is, why isn't anyone else jumping on the bandwagon? So I would say very simply, there are a few things. One is, as my Rebbe's brought down, one of his longest responses that he writes, and he says that, first of all, there's no source. There's no source, whether in the Talmud, whether in the Torah, whether in the early commentators, later commentaries, wherever, midrashim, anything. There's no source at all to say that I have an obligation to bring a non-Jew closer to his mitzvahs. Now, someone's going to jump up and down and scream and say, but you're a light to the nations. If you're a light to the nations, now they're going to say by definition, which is wrong, but they're going to claim according to the definition, if you are a light unto the nations, then your obligation is to teach the nations, right? So that may be true, right? That actually, I may agree. We have an obligation to teach them, but who says I have to do outreach? Outreach is a different thing, right? In other words, I would put up signs all over the place, front of churches, behind churches, by mosques, this, that. I'd be out there day and night on telephone poles, who knows, right? Billboards, take out ads on the radio, maybe make a few commercials, whatever it is, saying, hey, non-Jews got to wake up, right? You got to wake up to the Noahide laws. Who says just because we're a light unto nations, I have to be hitting the pavement, right? I have to go on YouTube and make all these videos, trying to convince people to be, to be good, abiding Noahides, right? Let's remember, we did a number of videos about Noahides, right? And let's remember that what is a Noahide obligated to keep? A Noahide is obligated to keep mitzvahs that make sense, according to the logic of the Torah. In other words, these things are going to be universal. Don't steal, don't kill, don't do idolatry, don't play with nature, right? Don't make hybrids of certain animals, right? Don't take a donkey and a horse, put them together to get a mule. Interesting enough, a mule is sterile, cannot reproduce, could be a punishment, in the fact that God does not stop you from doing it, but he doesn't allow it to reproduce on its own, right? So these are things that would make sense logically. Now, even if we are a light unto the nations, right? Even if that is true, So I would make the statement very definitively and say, if these things are universal, then why do I have to do outreach to teach people that? These things are obvious, right? I have to convince someone not to cheat on the taxes. If there's no legal loophole, I have to teach someone not to bash someone's head in, because whatever they did to them, road rage. I got to stop someone, I have to explain to someone not to do that. There are some things that I would say are 100% more obvious. There are things that may be a little bit less obvious, but they're universal. That's why a non-Jew is going to make it upstairs. God's not going to say, hey, they're not going to have a claim. They're not going to say, hey, God, why are you going to zap me over here? I didn't know anything about the Noahide laws. No one ever taught me. Where were the Jews? Right? That'll be their claim. Where were the Jews? Jews should be out there, paving the ground over here. Doing all these things in order to convince them to keep the Noahide laws. God's going to look at them and say, are you for real? They have an obligation to do that. Why do they have an obligation to do that? If it was something that wasn't obvious at all, and you never would have figured it out, I mean, don't you think playing with, playing with a Ouija board, sorcery, some other things, maybe it would make sense to a non-Jew that maybe I shouldn't be doing this because I'm playing with forces that I shouldn't be playing with. Maybe, right? God is not going to zap somebody if something is not obvious, right? It wouldn't be fair. In other words, he's gonna hold, he's gonna tie someone's arm behind their back and say, okay, let's go. They're playing with the stakes already behind them. They can't win over here, right? That wouldn't be fair. It totally wouldn't be fair. So therefore, God's going to say, listen, these things are universal. If these things are universal, then why do I have to send people all over the world trying to convince people, right? Why is that our job? You're right. If we are the chosen nation, right, there is a claim as well. Certainly we are not doing our job properly, right? And we see what's going on, over the last week. We saw what happened up north. All these people got, trampled to death. Now they're, missiles flying all over the place here. So we're not doing our job, right? We're not doing our job right. And I would not disagree, right? I definitely would not disagree. But if we were the chosen nation, right, which we are, if that is the case, if we do everything we're supposed to do, there is no question. There is no question at all. But even if we're not doing really what we should be doing, right? In other words, we're not holding where we need to be. Nonetheless, if a non-Jew is really searching, if a non-Jew, makes sense for them to come out of Christianity, not be a Hindu, any of these things, they come out of any paganism. Isn't it true, as the Talmud says, if a person wants to go in the right direction, God will help them. If they want to go in the wrong direction, God will not stop them. Right? In other words, they can fall in abyss. Right? The Torah tells me a number of times, the Torah says, let us make man in our image. Right? So who's we? Right? Who's God talking to? Right? So God, seemingly, Rashi says, others say, he's talking to the heavenly court. Why is he talking to the heavenly court? He's talking about making man. Well, it's a good idea. It's a bad idea. Right? He's showing humility. One explanation. Because he doesn't really need the heavenly court. He can create man. He can not create man. Make his own decision. He doesn't need the heavenly court. So what is it showing? It's showing beyond the shadow of a doubt humility. But there's another explanation. The other explanation is someone come along. Someone's going to say, hey, it says, let us make man. Must be there's more than one God. Now, could someone make that mistake? 100%. Someone could make that mistake. Could someone make such a mistake that then they get into idolatry? True. That certainly could happen. So you're going to say, why is that my fault? Right? That's exactly what God's going to say. I didn't tell you to do that. He said, oh, but what you wrote in the Torah, let us make man, you gave people the ability to make a mistake. So God says, of course, everyone's got free will. Same thing when God comes down and says, let us see what's going on in Sodom. Again, same question. Who's we? Right? The English we over here. Who's we? Same thing. Right? He's talking the heavenly court. So if he's talking the heavenly court, couldn't people make mistakes? Couldn't person make mistake and say, oh, must be more than one God? 100%. So let them make the mistake. Is it my obligation to go out there, and make sure people don't make the mistake so that people would have free will, right? But you would say, well, who says I'm going to be good at convincing them, right? So what's someone going to bring an example? They'll bring an example, Abraham. What did Abraham do? Abraham went out. Everyone was, worshiping their idols. Everyone had their pocket idol, right? Here's Bob, don't leave home without him. Everyone's got their pocket idol, right? So Abraham says, there's a God. There's one God. He created the world, right? So they say, how do you know? And he says, by a world of design, right? You see nature, you see how it works, the human body, all these different things. And he convinces so many people to convert, right? So are the women, he the men. So you're going to say, oh, look, isn't Abraham a good example? He was out there trying to convince the world, right? But there's a caveat. The Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, God needed someone to take the banner, right? To take the banner, take the flag of absolute monotheism, right? That's why Abraham is called the father of all nations, right? He's the father of the Arabs, of the Muslims, right? Because he had Yishmael. So he's the father of all nations. So you're going to say, oh, look, he tried to convince the whole world. Was he successful? To a certain point, right? There were a lot of people that converted. That is definitely true. But the reality is he convinced the whole world, right? He certainly didn't. But not only that, he wasn't Jewish, right? He certainly wasn't Jewish. Then you want to bring a proof from him, even though the Talmud says he kept the entire Torah before it was given, whatever that means, right? So if he has the status of a non-Jew, or at least a Noahide, then you say maybe he's a non-Jew, you get an obligation. But once the Torah is given at Mount Sinai, who in the world says that's my obligation, right? If it's, again, by the Torah itself, if somebody wants to convert, right? Someone wants to convert, they have to be taught. There's no possible way in this day and age anyone is ever going to figure out what God wants from them, right? By keeping the laws of the Torah. Because 80% of the Torah makes absolutely no sense, logically, right? Even the Jews, right? We have to work hard trying to understand, trying to uncover layer after layer what it means, what it represents. That's what a lot of the Rambam's work, the Guide for the Perplexed, is all about, is trying to figure out reasons for the mitzvahs. Now, really, the reason is it's all a divine decree, right? But, we're not believing by just a leap of faith either, right? We're living by the fact that things have meaning, right? There are ways to try and understand things to the best of our ability. One thing we have to realize, though, is this is godly. This is divine. So not a lot of it is going to make sense. So we don't say, well, it doesn't make sense, so who cares? No, I still have to keep it, but obviously I'm going to understand it better, and I'm going to keep it stronger if I do have some level, of understanding. Other people would say if I believe with perfect faith, that's good enough also. That'll draw me close to the king. But if it's something obvious, right? By conversion, the mitzvahs of the Torah are not obvious at all, right? At least 80%, if not more. Totally not obvious, right? Comes along the Torah itself. Non-Jew wants to convert, they have to learn, right? They cannot learn this on their own. They're coming out of left field, right? A lot of this stuff is going to be brand new. They're not going to have any idea why, what, where, when, how, right? All these different things. So they're going to have to learn. A non-Jew, that's not necessarily the case. Why not? It's not the case because these things that they have to keep 100% are obvious. If they're obvious and everybody has free will, right? So who says, again, right? We'll come back to the same question, right? If these things are obvious, I have to go out there and put up billboards and convince people. Why do I have to convince them? Why in the world do I have to convince them? That's not my job. If somebody comes to me and wants to learn and understand what the Noahide laws are, what they have to keep, how they have to keep them, and what their obligations are, okay. But, if something is so obvious, I don't have to be out there with a flag trying to bring people in, right? Now, even if, someone made the claim someone made the claims that, well, a non-Jew comes in, they're not going to accept it, right? They'll just be pushed aside, maybe, right? Maybe, maybe some rabbis, or maybe a lot of rabbis will push them aside. Why? First of all, maybe they don't know how to deal with them. That could be. Second reason is they're working with congregants who don't know that much about Judaism. So they're going to work with Jews, certainly, before they work with non-Jews, which makes what I do look a little bit strange. The fact that I work with, probably more non-Jews than Jews, but at the same time, we're looking out for our own. That doesn't mean just because we're chosen, that doesn't mean I just push it under the rug and I say, well, just, let them deal with themselves, right? Certainly not. But if they want to go in the right direction, see, this is a cop-out that people use, and they'll say, you got to be out there. You got to be out there training people, learning with them, other things, trying to bring them in. I don't have an obligation, right? I don't have an obligation to draw them in. There are a lot of things out here that are obvious, right? If they come out of Christianity and they want to go in the right direction, God is going to lead them in the right direction, right? I've had, a lot of people say, I came out of Christianity, didn't know what to do. All of a sudden, your name popped up, saw your website, saw this, saw that, right? It doesn't mean that when someone's looking to go in the right direction, everything happens like this, happens automatic. Doesn't necessarily happen that way. But someone, and anybody who's been in this position will know that if they are truly searching and they really want to be the real deal, whether as a Jew, as a convert, or as a Noahide, then they are going to be led in the right direction. Unfortunately, some people have been led astray. Unfortunately, there are some unscrupulous people out there, even if they call themselves rabbis. Doesn't really matter. We've spoken about that. So a person has to be careful, right? Certainly who they're going to learn from. That's true, right? But at the same time, just because we're the chosen nation doesn't mean I'm shirking my responsibility by not reaching out to non-Jews. Anybody who wants to be out, reached out to, they will be at some point, right? That is going to happen because they're truly searching, right? Someone who's truly searching will never get anywhere. And they'll never say, well, how could I get here? I never knew about it. It took me 30 years. There's a lot of information out there. I get contacted from people, Tunisia and India, places, in Africa where they don't even really have internet service, most of the day, when people are, at least seem to be interested either in Judaism or what it means to be a non-Jew. And they're living in Timbuktu, right? Barely have running water, some people, right? So how do these people get out? How do these people find the information? They find it, right? They find it however they find it, right? But it's not because, us Orthodox rabbis are scouring the land trying to find all these non-Jews to keep their mitzvahs. They come to us, okay, right? It's definitely true that, they shouldn't be pushed aside. They should be dealt with. And if rabbis don't know how to deal with them or can't deal with them, they should put them in contact with someone who can, right? They deserve to be dealt with. That is for sure. But who says that's my ultimate obligation, right? In other words, a non-Jew should be coming to us, just the opposite. A non-Jew should be coming to us and say, I want to learn Torah. That's what should be happening. Now, why is it not happening that way necessarily? I mean, there are people coming out of the woodwork. That is definitely true, right? But why does it not happen exponentially? So the onus is on us, right? Everything that's happening in the world happens for the sake of the Jewish people. What happened in Meron, right, last week on Lag BaOmer, all the people were killed by ultra-Orthodox Jews, right? Some younger, some older, all persuasions, right? You had Hasidim, you had Ashkenazim, you had Sephardim, you had Sephardic people, you had men, you had children. It was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. Now, I'm not saying if it was all secular Jews, that would be better, right? Any Jew that dies, right? They're a world in and of themselves, right? Now, all of a sudden, you got missiles flying all over the place, right? God is knocking on the door here saying, what in the world are you doing? Right? You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Someone's going to say, you know what? So you got to be out there working with non-Jews. That's not the issue. I can tell you there are thousands of more issues, that are much more crucial than this. I'm not saying this is not an important issue, right? By any stretch. Question is, is priority, right? This, if I had to scale, right, I would have to say out of the let's say the top 25 things that are crucial for the sake of the Jewish people today. Number 397.2 would be, being out there working with Noahides, right, and trying to convince them to be Noahides, right? I'm not saying it's not on the list. It's there. Should it be my major priority? Now, that's a little bit hard to say. I think it would be obnoxious to say, chutzpahdik to say. Why? Because there are 13.5 million Jews that don't know diddly squat about their religion, right? They don't know anything, right? So now I should be out there paving the ground for non-Jews, in order to keep their laws. I mean, that's a little bit of a stretch. You got to bring me tremendous amount of proof to show me that we have a spiritual holocaust going on here. And the most important question most Jews will ever ask in their lifetimes, I put ketchup or mustard on their hot dog, right? Hey, what about relish? Oh, relish? I didn't think about relish. There's so many Jews don't know anything. That my priority is working with non-Jews, and it's out there and I should be proselytizing the non-Jews. That's my focus. That's not Chabad's focus. I mean, it's part of their focus. It's not their entire focus. Their focus is working with Jews that don't know anything. They also work with non-Jews, right? They're also spreading this idea, about being Noahides. Fine. You want to tell me that's their priority? It's not their priority, right? Should they be dealt with? I'm not disagreeing, right? They definitely should be dealt with. And if their rabbis don't want to deal with them, push them off to someone who can. That's what they should do, right? But remember, we're going through a spiritual holocaust. That is not going to take precedence, right? A person, a non-Jew cannot say, and I've heard this many, many times, look at all these Hindus, right, in India and other places, and, they're backwards, they don't understand things, and all that. They're being brainwashed. You're right, they're being brainwashed. I agree. And they're worshiping cows, right? Sounds a little bit silly. They're worshiping cows. Okay, right? They're going to be wiped off the face of the earth because they're going against the Noahide laws. True, right? What's one of the Noahide laws? Idolatry. Can't go against idolatry. So what are you doing to save these billions of Indians, that are busy, worshiping cows? Now, God also gave us a brain, right? He gave us a brain to understand, to fathom, to make decisions, right? When the Torah says God puts the soul of life, he breathed the soul of life into man. What does the Aramaic translation say? He gave us a ruach memalelo. What's a ruach memalelo? It's the spirit that speaks. Well, don't animals speak? Right? If I play Dr. Dolittle and I could talk with the animals, great. They also speak. But there's a very big difference. We're not talking about speech over here. We're talking about understanding. We're talking about making decisions. Oh, animals also make decisions, right? They can choose to eat, choose not to eat. True. But animals only have one aspect of the soul. What aspect of the soul do they have? The animalistic side, like everybody does, but they're programmed. They're programmed DNA. They have no choice, right? They go according to instinct. If they go according to instinct, they don't really make decisions, right? Just based on what their DNA tells them to do, right? Even if you want to tell me they can choose to eat, not to eat, this, that, fine, but it's instinct, right? A lot of it has to do with instinct. That being the case, what about humans? Humans have more than instinct. Humans have definite understanding. Now, they could make good decisions. They can make bad decisions. They could have PhDs. They could have, 50 IQ, 70 IQ. They have average intelligence. Wouldn't average intelligence, I would say, right? Because I guess I grew up in the West, in the Western world. Average intelligence would say this doesn't make sense. Christianity doesn't make sense. Right? A lot of these things do not make sense. A lot of evidence, why not? Right? Not the purpose, for what we're doing here. The idea is God gave us a brain. So anyone who's listening came out of Christianity or paganism, they understand it didn't make sense. They asked a lot of questions. They didn't get any answers. As most of my students got thrown out of the church. That's what happened. So then they decided, okay, now what do I do? If they find out, well, maybe I convert. And I know people that took them years to realize that they could actually convert to Judaism, right? Then they find out, what if I can't convert? They find out about being a Noahide. It takes time, however long it takes. But they didn't go, I mean, I'm going to go on record here because we are taping this, right? This is live, here. So I will go on record in saying God gave everybody a brain. If he gave everybody a brain, can't they make the right decision or the wrong decision? So they're going to say, what are you talking about? They're being brainwashed, right? If we grew up in communist Russia, we take the Russian flag, we'd be waving it, back and forth. We'd all be atheists. True? Right? That very well may be true, right? But not all Russians are atheists. Maybe a lot of them are. But there are some, right, that actually use their brain, came out of it, right? So what do I care if they're brainwashed? God doesn't care about that either. He gave everybody the opportunity. If they have the opportunity, and these things are obvious, and as the founding fathers of America would say, this is self-evident. If it's self-evident, why do I have to be out there knocking on doors? Right? Why in the world would that be my obligation if it's self-evident? Well, someone will say it's not self-evident to everybody. I have to worry about someone else. I have to worry about the entire world. I do if that person's a Jew, right? That's different. A Jew we never, ever want to lose, right? That Jewish soul that has a connection, that was at Mount Sinai, that soul was at Mount Sinai. That we never want to lose. We want to try and bring them back as much as possible. A non-Jew doesn't mean they don't have to be educated. Doesn't mean they don't have to keep the Noahide laws or be taught what it means to be a Jew in order for conversion. Right? We're not saying that, but at the same time, there are things I think, and people can disagree, that's fine. There are so many things that are obvious and that are self-evident. I mean, I should bother, putting up posts, trying to convince Noahides, trying to convince non-Jews, listen, you got to understand, this doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense, so why didn't you just come to us? Why is that my job? If they already came to the realization, right, and they use their brains for the right thing, they'll get to the right conclusion, right? They'll for sure get there. Nobody who's ever been searching for truth never got there, if they were truly searching. I mean, a lot of people claim to be searching, right? But, I would say it's a bunch of hogwash because they're not really looking for truth. Even though people say, well, you think you have the truth, Christians think they have the truth, Muslims think they have the truth, all these other religions. Again, you have to evaluate evidence, right? And it doesn't matter where a person lives, doesn't matter how they grew up, right? In my case, right, so I didn't grow up as an Orthodox Jew. So, okay, I stayed within Judaism because that's what I knew. I didn't think, to look anywhere else. I wanted to learn more about Judaism, and the more I learned, the more I saw it was true. Right? But again, there was a search. There was a spiritual search. There was a true search, and based on that true search, I got to where I needed to get to. I had a lot of detours, along the way. It wasn't a straight path. If something took me, let's say, 6, 7, 8 years to get to where I needed to be, it took my wife too. It's like a quarter of the time. So some people it takes longer, some people it takes shorter, but in the end, if they're searching and they're really searching, they will get there, right? They'll get there whether someone's knocking on their door or not. And who says if someone's going to knock on the door, they're really going to listen, right? That's another thing, right? That the Torah tells me, the book of Leviticus, Torah tells me that there's a mitzvah to rebuke my people, right? It says, Ocheach tochiach es am misecho. Give a little bit of grammar here. Ocheach tochiach, you shall surely rebuke am misecho. What does am misecho mean? Your people. What does your people mean? In 2 words, the Jews. Right, that was 1, sorry. The Jewish people, that's 2. It means the Jewish people. Right, so now, without any, fancy Talmud, without any midrashim, when it says your people, all the Karaites, going to be singing my praises right now, because all your people means Jews. That's clear. We're not going to say what it says, the children of Israel, B'nai Yisrael, right? It's talking about the men, not the women. We're not saying that. It's your people. Your people means Jews. If your people means Jews, I got a very, very strong proof here to say that I have an obligation to rebuke my people. That's not a contradiction to say that, oh, you're the chosen people. You're right, we are the chosen people. But who says because I'm chosen, I have an obligation to rebuke non-Jews to convince them to be Noahides? That's a little bit of a jump. I mean, that's a huge jump, right? To say that I have an obligation to rebuke my people, we don't know how to do rebuke today in general. So that mitzvah really goes by the wayside. If we could give rebuke, like the Chaim Coffman is a famous story. The Chaim Coffman heard he had a student in the yeshiva in Radin that smoked on Shabbos, and that student was leaving the yeshiva, and the Chaim Coffman wanted to speak to him. So the Chaim Coffman, when he went to speak to him, held his hand very tight, and he said the word Shabbos 2 or 3 times and burst out in tears. And that was it, and he walked away. Now, that student, he ended up leaving the yeshiva, but he never desecrated Shabbos again. Right? He never smoked on Shabbos again, kept Shabbos. Right? Now, if we could give rebuke, like the Chaim Coffman in that case, okay. Right? But since many rabbinical authorities hold we don't know how to give rebuke, right, in general, it doesn't mean we don't have to scream out, we don't have to cry out against certain things. You have to know when, you have to know where, right, etc. But really, the mitzvah of rebuke today is gone by the wayside. Right? Really, it's gone by the wayside. So, therefore, since I would have much more obligation to give rebuke to a Jew, right, who says I have an obligation at all to convince a non-Jew, to rebuke them, so to speak, and convince them to keep the Noahide laws. Right? We mentioned before, there are things that are obvious. I have to tell somebody that's something that's obvious. It depends. If a person's married, a spouse might tell them things that they do wrong that are obvious, and they keep doing it over and over and over again. So why repeat it? So the person gets the message, right? So they get the message. But, a person has to know how to do it and how to speak and, all these different things. At least so the message should get through instead of yelling and screaming and all that. But, who says that's my obligation over here? Right? I certainly don't have, I certainly have an obligation to rebuke my own people. Right? To say that, there's a very strong obligation, to rebuke the Christians, rebuke everybody's not keeping the Noahide laws. Don't they know they're idolatrous? All right, what am I going to do? I'm going to write letters to the Pope, to the cardinals, to the bishops, tell them they're all Ovdei Avodah Zarah, they're all into idolatry. What, you don't think they know that? You don't think they're aware that we think that? I'm going to convince them? I'm not going to convince them. Right? Maybe some of them will leave the fold because of it. I doubt it. Right? But maybe some of them will leave. I have to sit there and try and convince them. I'm going to go to Hollywood, convince all these immoral people that, they have to keep the Noahide laws. And they're going to listen, you're going to get a spokesman to convince the masses this is what they should do. I don't think so. Right? It's going to say, well, you're not even trying. You're right. You're right, because it's not my obligation. Right? It's not my obligation. Right? I come in contact with people all the time, that however they came out of Christianity, or paganism, they find the right path. Right? Whether it's conversion, whether it's Noahide, they get there. Right? But it's not going to be on a mass scale. Right? The only time it could even be considered on a mass scale is when it's going to be too late. When there are miracles going on left and right by the end of days. Right? By the end of days, no non-Jew is going to be allowed to convert. Why? Just like in the time of David and King Solomon, they weren't allowed to convert. Why? Because there were miracles. Tremendous amount of miracles going on. And since there's so many miracles going on, they'll say, oh, let me be part of the Jewish people. Well, too bad. You can't be part of the Jewish people at that point. Why not? Because you won't have free will. Your free will will be taken away. By the end of days, right, it's brought down that prophets tell us the miracles that are going to occur during the end of days, during the war of Gog and Magog, as it says in Zechariah chapter 14, what's going to be? It's going to surpass the miracles that happened in Egypt. Right? So whoever survives, right, these non-Jews now are going to say, look, I want to believe now. Fine. Right? If they survive, if some of them survive, they're not going to be allowed to convert. right? So they'll be holding by the Noahide laws, right? They're going to have to hold by the Noahide laws, right? But, let's make clear, anybody, and I mean anybody who's been in this process, however long it took them, sometimes it can take a person years, sometimes it can take them months, whatever it is, they get led to the right path. Some people can be misled, right? They can be convinced of other things. So what happened to their true path, right? So what is God saying? They got misled. Can a person get misled in this world? Yes. Is it common? It can be common, right? But if a person's really searching, they'll get out of it, right? How many times I heard people learn by people, certain people, you should never learn by, and what happened? They got caught up, right? They got involved. It was very hard for them to leave, right? A good example, what's one of the first places a former Christian goes, before they either seek out, to convert or be a Noahide, that's being Messianic, right? They have all the trappings of Judaism, but the reality is they're a Christian, right? They're certainly a Christian. They go to what they know, but it's a big step in order to leave that, as well. But could a person get duped in that and stay there for a long time? 100%. Could also be. I know somebody did that. He got stuck there for years. It took them a long time to get out till they finally understood what was going on. Okay, so if a person's really searching, they'll get there. They will definitely get there. Now, some people will take longer, some people not. It depends. It depends how strongly they're searching. It depends the validity of what they're seeing, how they evaluate evidence. I mean, it could be dependent on a lot of things, right? It could be dependent on influences around them, family, friends, spouses. I mean, people I come in contact with. Also, family is very, very hard to fight against. They put a lot of pressure, as family members can do. And what happens is either they feel indebted to them, or even if they don't feel indebted to them, they're under their spell to a certain extent. And that's very tragic. Why? Because they're not given the chance to think for themselves. Because someone has a greater influence. I know some people that really wanted to do the right thing. They just got caught up in their environment. They got caught up in who was around them, and people very strong, charismatic, etc., and convinced them of things that they should never have ever been convinced of. I asked someone recently something about that, and I said, I don't understand. I said, how in the world could you think this was okay? How in the world could you think, as an Orthodox Jew, right, growing up as an Orthodox Jew, this should be okay? But what's the answer? The answer is this person was influenced by other people, right? And he thought, okay, maybe this isn't so bad. But deep down, he probably knew that it really wasn't the right thing. And when he saw what was going on, definitely understood it wasn't the right thing, but, got convinced. Now, can that happen? It can certainly happen, right? But if you don't have a way to deal with it, or people to speak to, or, you're not really thinking straight, then what can happen? A person can fall in an abyss, right? You can certainly fall, 100%, into a pit. That's what idolatry is. People even want to say that, it doesn't have the same flavors it did, way back when, that the flavor of idolatry was unbelievably strong, right? Today, the world is under the influence of Amalek. Amalek, what do they bring to the world? They brought this idea that everything is by chance, right? There is no godliness. There is nothing. There is no supernatural. That's exactly what got Mr. Haman himself killed in the book of Esther. He's an offshoot of Amalek. He's pinned by angels. God opens his eyes. He sees these angels pinning him to Esther's couch. Achashverosh walks back in. He's like, what, you scoundrel? You're going to take my wife in front of me? And what's he going to say? I'm being pinned by angels? Can't say that. He's Amalek, right? He's part of Amalek, doesn't believe in supernatural, and that killed him, right? That was the final peg, so to speak, that did him in, right? Killed by his own motto, right? So these type of things, you're going to say, well, it's not so powerful today like it was, idolatry. So that may be true. It doesn't mean people are not caught up in it. Doesn't mean people don't go astray. And idolatry doesn't just mean bowing down to an idol. It's giving something power, right? That doesn't really have any power at all. Whether it's entertainment, sports, money, fame, right? Whatever it is. So people get sucked into all these things, and they're not thinking, because most people, when I was growing up, I heard the statement: 1% of the world thinks, 4% think they think, 95% rather die than think. Nobody wants to think anymore. There are no more philosophers, really. In the world, people just react. They don't really have anything set in stone. Values change, ideas change. As they grow older, morality is relative. All these different things. So they're not giving the ability. They're not giving themselves the ability, really, to evaluate things, because we're living in this Amaleki world. And this Amaleki world says, there's no supernatural. Look at all these terrible things that happen. People die, tragedy, all these different things. Life doesn't make any sense. So why bother thinking? But if a person would really think, just a little bit, the intricacies of the human body, how nature works, all these things, to see godliness in the world, okay, that's a different thing, right? But most people would rather die than think. They just want to enjoy life, right? They want to come out of Corona. They want everything to be opened up. They want, businesses to be running like normal, want to be making money, want to be going to ball games. No one wants to be cooped up. You hear these conspiracy theories. They're pretty funny. The government wants this, government wants that. I don't think government wants riots, that they're shutting down for no reason, and they think, all these people are going to die, and all the statistics are made up, and how many people died of Corona and this and that. They're not interested in this. People may disagree and bring a whole world, new world power and different, create a whole new world, different things, whatever. That's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. The point, let's not get sidetracked over here. The point is that we're living in that type of world. We're living in a world where values are not sacred, where things change, right? Morality changes. So if that is the case, right, and all these things are true, then you'll say it's very hard for someone to actually get to the truth. So I won't disagree, because we're just caught up in the everyday and we get beaten down in life, right? That's what happens, right? But if somebody really wants truth, and they are really, really searching, then they're going to get there. But when it comes to something that is so obvious, right? Many of these laws are obvious. You have to learn by someone to understand how they work, right? They are intricate. I'm not going to say not, that they're not intricate, but a lot of them, you don't have to have 100 IQ over here, right? You don't need that. So for me to sit there and, be out there trying to convince what's already obvious, how many people are you going to get? They're going to say, yeah, that's obvious. Very nice. So what? What does it have to do with anything? I want to do it. I'll do it. I don't. This, that, different aspects of it. Who cares? Right? So I got to sit there and debate them, and try and tell them why it's true and why the Torah is true. Most people are not interested. They're totally not interested. They'd rather be pagans. Okay. So let them be pagan. But you say it's not fair, because these people who are pagan, they're going to die, right? That's the punishment for the Noahide laws. And we mentioned many times, why is that so severe? Why is the punishment of that so severe? Because it's obvious, right? There are things that are point blank obvious. If they're obvious, God's going to say, I told you, I warned you, right? Even if they didn't get the warning, they should have known better. Right? And we justify things all the time. We think that, I can do this, I can do that. Euthanasia, not a problem. That it's mercy for the person because he's suffering, blah, blah, blah. But that's, we hold that's murder. Right? So God, if God gave us a brain and he gave us the ability to analyze information and to understand information, and we're not in a cult, right? We're not being, we're not staying up all night, we're not being deprived of sleep, or food, or, anything else. They're not delirious. We're not doing drugs. We're not doing these other things. So he gave us the ability to use our minds. If a person wants to use their mind for the wrong thing, okay. You try and convince a drug addict or an alcoholic not to be an alcoholic, right? Or be a drug addict, right? How are they going to get convinced? They will get convinced when they hit rock bottom, right? Now, they don't really have to hit rock bottom. You can try this, that, but they're probably not going to listen, right? Most likely, they're not going to listen. What, shouldn't I try? Probably have an obligation to try, right? Probably have an obligation to try. But if it's something that a person can figure it out and can understand, and all things being equal, they want to go in the right direction, okay, so they'll find the help. They will get the help that they need. Not that I have to be on imagine my face on every billboard, on every phone pole, what do you call it? Phone pole, whatever it's called, You see it, there with, like my uncle, I put on my Uncle Sam hat, which I use for Purim, and have my finger pointed like this. You should be a Noahide. They're like, what's a Noahide? Put it with plaster all over the place, right? And do that. I can't imagine that's going to, save the world, by any stretch. Maybe it'll save a few people, maybe, but again, anybody wants to be the real deal, whether they convert or they don't convert, they'll get there. They will definitely get there. They don't need me out there pounding the pavement, so to speak, in order to convince them. That they don't need, right? And to think that because we're light into nations, that's my obligation, that's a huge stretch. And it's a huge stretch for one very simple reason, because of all the Jews that don't know anything about Judaism. I will reach out to them a million times more than I would ever reach out to non-Jews. You know why? Because the Talmud tells us all Jews are interrelated, right? We're all connected. If one Jew does something wrong somewhere, all Jews are blamed. You don't see it anywhere else, right? You don't see it by any other nation, right? Imagine someone in Italy, an Italian in Brooklyn, does something wrong, and burning down Italy. That's it. No more cannoli. It never happened. Never, ever happened. Yeah, there's discrimination. There's racism. That's all true, right? But no one ever says one person does something wrong, we're going to burn down your nation. Never happens, right? It only happens by the Jewish people. Why? Because there's this concept. We're all interrelated, right? If we're all interrelated, my obligation to them is tenfold, a millionfold will come first, before non-Jews. But that doesn't mean we don't have an obligation to teach them, right? The only caveat is I don't have an obligation to reach out to them. That is the difference. So look at that. I ended right on time.
I'm here.
Right,
and
there we go.
Yeah, we're good. You caught me the 1 second while I stepped away from my desk. That's funny. All right.
So that's it, right? I got you at the exact time, and that's it. And I won't have any complaints again.
Actually, you're like a minute and a half early, man. You could have just kept on going as fast as you talk. You could have got in a whole chapter.
Listen, I didn't even talk so fast.
No, you did really good. You did good.
Actually, I heard myself talk, and I was like, "Am I really talking that fast?" I was like, "No, a little bit." I worked on it. But,
thank goodness we don't have you on any kind of Coca-Cola or caffeine.
That's what I'm on now. But I always tell people, listen, that if you have trouble, listening to it, just turn it down half the speed. I was listening, someone this morning, and they were screaming as loud as I was. I was like, oh, now I know what it feels like.
That's funny. That's actually a really good.
I was like, wow, this is really loud. How do I turn the volume down?
That's actually a really good idea, though, because I even listen to people sometimes who actually, they do tend to talk pretty fast, and I never thought you could literally just kind of slow it down just a little bit of speed, and it'll actually make it easier to follow. Likewise.
Or if you're watching something that's like 3 hours, you just do it, 1.5 times. And,
right.
You do it. If you do it double the speed, you won't be able to hear them because they speak too fast. But
right.
But it was funny because I couldn't figure out how to turn it lower, and it was like screaming in my ear, like the highest level. So I said, now I'm getting a taste of my own, medicine. Then you ask the question when bad things happen to righteous people. That's it. It was right there.
There you go. All right. Well, Rabbi, thanks for everything. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you guys. Actually, not next week. I believe next week is going to be falling on Shavuot or Shavuos. And so it will be 2 weeks before we regain our consciousness here. now
I don't know if you keep playing it back enough times, Maybe you won't regain the consciousness. I don't know. It depends.
Now, in 3 weeks, I'm going to be gone. I've got to, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It's the last 24th through the 28th. I'm actually traveling on my job to do a webinar, a live webinar school for Texas Bankers Association. So I'm going to be on the road from the Saturday night before all the way up to. I'll be gone for 7 days for full. And that's going to be the week after Shavuot. So anyway, it's going to be kind of a broken up series this time, but maybe we can try to figure out an alternative time to get it put in. So we'll see. All right. So thank you guys once again for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe. Please subscribe if you haven't yet to the YouTube channel. Turn on notifications. Click the all button, the all selection, so you can make sure you get all the notifications I send out. And meanwhile, you guys
Ding.
Ding ding. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Peace out, everybody.